Hello everybody and welcome to another video, and today it is the 6th of September and there's a lot of news on several fronts that I will get into, so this is a very interesting episode. Let's start with the Kherson region, where I don't really have much to say about the southern part of Kherson. There weren't really any new developments here, just besides the regular positional fighting around the Posad axis and Alexandrivka. Nothing really new around here. One thing that I did find interesting around here is that a video was actually posted by this Belarusian volunteer unit, the so-called Terror Battalion, showing that they were firing on Russian positions, and it got geolocated to this town over here, which is actually on the other side of the Inhulets River. So that's pretty interesting, and it forced me to redraw my map just to indicate that Russia does have at least a tentative presence on the other side of the river, which is possible, because there are still bridges that are intact, although this one isn't anymore, just based on what was shown in the video. So you still could cross over the bridge or the river plausibly, because it's a pretty shallow river. It's not that deep, at least compared to the Dnieper River, and it's not that wide either. So you could have like sorties and minor units just transported across. So I'm sure that on other parts of the front line, this is also the case, in that my map might be wrong as a result, because I'm just using the river as a line just to show the division, but that's not always the case. Anyway, in the area of the Andrivka Lazov bridgehead, we do have an update on the Kostromka area, which I don't know why I have it black here. It is actually red now. So Russia did push out the Ukrainians from this town yesterday, and now the fighting is really going on around here. You have like these fields over here as sort of no man's land, and Russia's trying to push back and take what's left of Suki Stavak. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians, they reported on assaults towards Bilohirka, and there was no success in those attacks. Bilohirka is still under Russian control, and I've changed it from contested to fully under their control for now. Now, in the area of Blahodativka, Russia has been kicked out of here. I talked about that before, but now Ukraine has really coalesced their gains, and they do have a pontoon bridge built around here just to connect to here. So even if Russia destroys the new pontoon bridges, which were built by Ukraine over here, and they'll at least have one over here. So I'm sure that will, at least in the future, be a target of the Russian Air Force. And the Russian Air Force has been very busy this past day striking the reserve positions of the Ukrainians in this town over here, this key junction, which is used to sort of coordinate the attacks through the bridgehead. So Russia did strike over there, and they did strike on some other towns around here. I think they struck this part too. They struck these like ammo depots or like warehouses that are located in this area, and I'm pretty sure that this town doesn't even have a name, because this word in Russian or Ukrainian, I'm not sure. I think it means unknown, and just given how minuscule a lot of these towns are, some of them don't even have names. So you do have Russia striking some of the Ukrainian positions around here in this town too. But again, no major changes on this line besides Kostromka being retaken by Russia. Now, over here, I did have to make several changes. First of all, Arkhangelsk is fully under Russian control for now. Previously, it was contested, but it seems like the front line is stabilized right outside of the town itself, and the Ukrainians have not attacked today, to my knowledge, but they did gain some ground around Olhine, and the line of fighting is probably around this road over here, although it could be here, it could be here, but I don't mean to be too pedantic. Now, once Olhine falls, there's just really just open fields in this entire area, and the problem is you just have Nova Petrivka, and if Nova Petrivka were to fall, this will put the Russian garrison in Arkhangelsk in a very precarious position. They would also have to withdraw from there. So I think that we will see some Russian reinforcements sent to this area just to prevent any sort of major breakthroughs by the Ukrainians, because there is a good chance for a breakthrough around here. This is probably the one sector of Kherson where they have the best chance of breaking through. And now that almost all of Visokopelia is under their control, it might also be fully under their control, although I'm not 100% sure about that, so I'm leaving Russia in at least partial control in the southern outskirts. The Russians, they're still present pretty close to Potomkine. They have their defensive positions set up around these tree lines over here. And the reason they're not withdrawing is because there's still a chance that they can counterattack and retake Potomkine. And then if that were to happen, then you could see some sort of fighting around Visokopelia and potentially retaking it again. So it will certainly be on Ukraine's agenda to force Russia to withdraw from this area, because they do have some forces stationed here, and the problem is that it is an open area, so they would be exposed. And Ukraine does have at least some of the higher precision missiles and the MLRS systems, although their artillery can't necessarily match Russia's artillery. The really big disparities between Russia and Ukraine are sort of offset on this specific front. So I would still say that Russia has an advantage in terms of artillery in this area over here, but it's not to the same extent as it is on the entire front line in general. Additionally, the Ukrainians made some gains over here. They shelled this town over here for a while, and it was really a town that they were eyeing. They wanted to capture it, and now they've succeeded. And the interesting thing is, it's really on this road along Potomkine, and it connects to all these other towns over here with this key road junction, which Ukraine has really passed and taken over by now. And this was really a defensive line that Russia was utilizing for the first week of the counteroffensive. But due to the incessant attacks and additional reserves coming in from other parts of Ukraine to assist in the counteroffensive, they have been able to make some gains today that I'm going to talk about. So, first of all, this town over here is contested, and I would say that Russia should probably try to hold on if they want to maintain the front line around this line over here. Although they could fall back, and I'll get to that now. But first, the Ukrainians, they've penetrated the line over here as well, and there's fighting going on in this town over here. Although the majority of it is still under Russian control, we will see fighting there today and tomorrow, of course. In Petrivka, most of it has fallen to the Ukrainian control, and I think that was also the situation yesterday, but I wasn't aware of it when I made my map. And I think Russia, they've probably withdrawn by now to Leninske, which is not even a town. You can't even consider it a town. It's just like a patch of bushes. So technically, this town or locality is under Russian control. So they have at least some sort of positions over here and also over here. So those are sort of the nodes that could be used to coordinate some defensive line. But I would say that it's not difficult at all to overrun those bushes, and that the Russians would probably have to withdraw to this town over here, which is has more fortifications and is obviously more dense. The one area we haven't seen Ukrainian advances in this northern sector is actually around Osarivka, and that again is because Zolota Balka is really on higher elevation than some of these other steppes around here. So it would be difficult for Ukraine to push through. Although I don't know why they didn't use the 128th Mountain Assault Brigade in this area, and instead they moved them into this like open field area and totally decimated the units. So that's just something that I didn't understand, because taking Zolota Balka, that can be used to, like, first of all, get higher ground in terms of elevation, and then firing onto some of these other towns around here, like the one that I was talking about here, which Russia will have to fall back into. So I just don't understand the rationale behind that. Maybe Zolota Balka is already pretty heavily defended compared to some of the other towns around here. Russia's probably using this area to like store some ammunition, and I would say, yeah, it is probably more defendable than the other towns around here that are really just isolated by low elevation plains, which could be a blessing or it could be the downfall of the town. Some of the last things I want to talk about in this region before moving on is that in the area over here with the Darivka, I've talked about before the bridge over here. It's a bridge that is necessary for some of the supply lines to just transport along the entire Kherson front line, and just to get equipment from one place to another, because you do have the Inhalets River sort of disrupting Russia's coordination along the entire front over here, because one part is around Posad Pokrovske, Kiselivka. This area is isolated from the Andriivka Lazov area in the Visokopilia front. So that bridge is pretty important in terms of connecting supplies and everything. But it's been destroyed now for a few days. And according to the satellite imagery, there was a pontoon bridge located right around here, and there's images from the satellites showing that this part is submerged, like most of it is submerged by now, and that's a big problem in terms of logistics. Although it could be a new one could be set up. What I was thinking though is that there's a possibility that this pontoon bridge was never actually destroyed, in that it's just that this part of the river is so shallow that they were able to do this really clever ploy where the edges of the river were over the water, and then the in between it's submerged to give this look that it's actually destroyed. Maybe Russia destroyed it themselves, and it would give Ukraine this like false idea that it was already destroyed, and then they wouldn't touch it. And this is actually something that was utilized by the Russian army in their military exercises in the Zapad 2021 exercise, which was conducted in like September with Russia and Belarus. They had these partially submerged pontoon bridges utilized in terms of like having tanks cross through and different sort of like vehicles. So that is possible, and I'm sure that Russia has used that strategy in other areas as well. So that's something to look out for. Now, the Russians, they announced the Ukrainian casualties, at least according to their side of the story. Obviously, there's no way to confirm their numbers, but I will read them out just for the sake of understanding where they're coming from and what they're alleging. So they're saying that over 3,100 Ukrainian troops were either killed or wounded. The terminology they used was losses, so that's sort of ambiguous, but I would not misconstrue that for deaths. Could probably include also wounded and POWs and all of that. They also said that Ukraine lost 152 tanks, 334 infantry, armored vehicles, assault vehicles, and special vehicles, all in total. 7 Su-25s, 1 Su-24, 3 MiG-29s, and 3 Mi-8s helicopters. So those are the Russian allegations for casualties. And next time I'll also add in the Ukrainian allegations because I know that the Kiev Independent, they have a list of like all the Russian casualties for today that come from like the Operational Command South area of the Ukrainian command. So I apologize for not having those numbers on me now. Now let's move on to the situation in around Velika Novosilka because this was interesting. We had the DPR report that they took over Novopol, and they also said they took over Vermivka, which is interesting because it is a pretty fortified town. So I'm keeping it contested. I'm just gonna say they entered it, and the thing is, I've talked about for a while now that DPR and Russian recon and scouts, they've been infiltrating the town, scouting its defensive positions, and it's possible now that perhaps maybe the third corps, at least parts of it, were sent to Vermivka, and now they're planning some sort of attack in the area because we don't necessarily know where the third corps is being sent. There's a chance that it was sent here, or maybe this is just an unrelated assault by the DPR forces. And the thing is, Velika Novosilka is a very important town in the defense of the Zaporizhia line, which is now been heavily defended by Ukraine for a while. So breaking through around here could have some major implications for the front line in general. It is situated around this river that flows for a while, and I would say if the in the future the DPR forces were to exploit whatever gains they make today in the area around Velika Novosilka, they would probably have to coordinate with the garrison around Pavlivka, and they could potentially destroy these supply routes to here and just expel the Ukrainian forces from their fortifications around here right now, sort of push them back a good like 10 miles or so. Now, let's move on to the Pesky area, where we have some updates on the situation. There's now footage from the ground confirming, first of all, that the ring road is fully under the DPR control. And this was mainly done by the Somali Battalion and the 11th Regiment of the DPR. So here we have a video showing that the DPR forces are right next to this bridge, and it was so close that they probably already stepped onto it, and that's why I have the map looking like this. So now all of Pesky has been taken, including the siege factory around here, where there was fighting for a while, and it did take a while for the Ukrainians to be pushed out, but they finally were. And now Pervomaiske is where the main focus will be. The Russians already have their positions along these roads over here, so they can begin to mop up the Ukrainian forces in the area around these residential areas, which could be difficult. It could be very similar to what occurred in Pesky, although now the Russians will probably use the TOS systems even more, and they'll probably use some like 152 millimeter mortar guns, since those are like a staple of the 11th Regiment in these battles around here. So they will be raining down heavy artillery on the Pervomaiska area, and we could expect to see some limited gains by the Russians in this area over the next few days. There was a reported counterattack by the Ukrainian forces from the direction of Vodiane towards Pesky, and this was not successful. Their armored vehicles were decimated by the Russian artillery, and we even have a video here that I have linked of Russia destroying an M113. So if you're interested, look at that. The videos also they don't show another key component of why this failed. Another reason that was mentioned is that this entire area with the open fields was very heavily mined, and the vehicles, they were just decimated by the sheer amount of mines that were planted by the Russian forces, and they just got destroyed and were forced to retreat to their positions along the ring road over here. Now, let's go on to Kodama, where I finally mark Kodama as fully under Russian control, so I need to, first of all, change this from black to red. Over the past few days, Russians have reported that they've been clearing up the area around here, these western hills, and the western part of the town in general. And I even reported that Ukraine attempted a counter attack in this area, but it failed. And that's also probably part of the reason why the video that was linked of the Russian media driving into Kadema from the Semihiria area was so far away from the front lines. Well, in reality, it's not even that far, but the front lines are closer to here, so you'd expect to have at least some footage from the city center, specifically the church or the mall or the post office, but we didn't see any of that yet, although I do expect to see some videos of that later on. Once the town is farther away from Ukrainian shelling, but now we have to look into the future. I don't expect to hear much from Kadema now, and we're moving on to some other towns around here that will be at the epicenter of the fighting. So now that Russia does have control of the heights in this area, they're going to have a pretty good advantage in terms of their shelling of Mykolaiivka. So you could see an assault towards here. Also on Mykolaiivka, Druha, and Odradivka, you can see some heavy shelling over here, which would compel the Ukrainians to withdraw, or just to make a no man's land as they withdraw towards their positions on the western part of this highway over here. Also, I know that I have Vesela Dolina and Zaitseve marked as contested, but that's not true. I'm gonna have to admit I was wrong about that. The map looks a bit more like this. But now that Kadema has actually fallen, you could see actual assaults beginning towards these two towns. So first of all, with the height secured around here, they can fire upon Zaitseve pretty easily, and also on Vesela Dolina. So you could expect to see at least the resumption of some operations around here, because Kadema really was a linchpin of the Ukrainian defense around here. And we will see if the Ukrainians are resilient and able to improvise when their domes of defense are overrun. But I do expect to see some changes around here in the near future. So do look out for what occurs in this area. It has been relatively quiet, but I think that's starting to change now. I did not talk about this yesterday, but I should have. Of course, I was talking about the Kherson counteroffensive, so I didn't really have time. So, the 63rd Battalion of the 103rd Territorial Defense Brigade, they recorded this video, which is geolocated to right near this lake over here, in front of this random house. It was mainly just like a PR video showing them roaming through the streets of Rozerne, which is really just a ghost town. Nobody's living there. And it was sort of like the incident that occurred where the Ukrainians reached the border between Russia and Ukraine, around Terranova over here, and then they took a photo. But the difference is, in this case, I don't think any of the people from this Territorial Defense Brigade suffered any losses. So we have another video of them returning to the southern bank of the Donetsk River. So again, this was just for like a PR victory, and at least in that front they were successful. But all these towns around here, I will just say that many of them are just no man's land, and I'm going to highlight some. These ones over here, no actual like Russian or Ukrainian troops are present here. Some scouts do come in just to like monitor the other side of the river, but due to the really like lack of investment in these fronts, they are very lightly manned, and there's like no reason to even focus on it at the moment. So you could have like minor incidents where Ukraine is able to pass through the river and nobody notices, and nobody even notices that they're in the town just because it's so lightly defended. But are they going to be able to stay there and build a bridgehead based off of that? No, because the second they go to Debrova, you do have a Russian garrison there, and same for Yampil. So no, there's no chance that the Ukrainians are able to build a bridgehead in this area around Zerne, which is why they subsequently withdrew around back to the other side of the river. And then the same thing also happened in this town over here, Stary Caravan. I have a video here in geolocation showing that they were also roaming through the center of this town over here, and it is also a ghost town, and it was the 79th Air Assault Brigade in here. The video is from 2 days ago, and no, they don't control it. They withdrew like the same thing that happened in Zerne. So again, just a PR video. Let's move on now to the most important front for a second. So this is very weird. I originally edited the polygon over here to show the changes around Verbivka and Balakliya, but for some reason it did not save when I opened up the other presentation mode for this map. So I just had to go in and quickly edit the map to show the changes roughly. So these aren't the most accurate. I already had a pretty nice outline of the situation before, but I'll just have to go with this for now. So what occurred here is that for the past few weeks, there's been some pretty heavy shelling of Balakliya by the Ukrainian forces, and there were also rumors abound throughout the Telegram channels that there would be some sort of counteroffensive in the area of Kharkiv. So that could have been over here, but again, this entire line over here is also a part of Kharkiv. So it's one of the most ignored parts of the front line, which is why this front and the Kherson front were the two best places to have counteroffensives. So obviously Ukraine would opt to attack in these two areas. Now, originally the line of the fighting was around here, and it was pretty stable, but both sides really had pretty limited amounts of troops. So there wasn't really many changes for almost half a year. And what ended up happening is the Ukrainians, they amassed at least some force, and I don't know the units involved yet, but once I do have a good idea of that, I do want to look at the units that are involved in this assault. So they first pushed into Verbivka over here, and they actually took it with pretty good ease, which is interesting because it's actually a not that dense of a settlement, but it is still like a suburb with a moderate amount of houses that could have been used to like defend in a sort of similar way that you would in any urban type settlement. But they did take it over, and there was a video released from the area, so I have it marked as blue. And other maps like Rybar, they also have it marked as blue, so I am pretty sure that it's fully under their control. What I'm not sure about is the situation here in Yakovenkov. I'm pretty sure the Rybar map actually had it marked as fully under Ukrainian control, but I would say that this is unlikely just yet, although it could have happened. It could happen in the future. What I'll say is that they would have been so overextended by that the Russia could have either like encircled them or just decimated their forces, and we haven't heard any of that yet. So I do think that marking this town as under Ukrainian control is very premature, but they're certainly attacking in that direction. And the reason is they want to reach this road over here. And by reaching this road, they would be able to cut off the supplies to Balakliya from at least one direction. The other direction that they would have to cut off is this direction over here, which is not going to happen. So we're going to focus on this area over here. And then for this supply line, this is mainly just to supply the bridgehead that Russia was able to build over the past few weeks. They were able to take over these towns with relative ease, but were pushed back at the area around Husarivka. And there's also ambiguity in the area around Zalaman because Ukraine did report that they were assaulting this town over here, Savinitsy, but this would require crossing the river, so I think it's just positional fighting going on along the river with like some cross river shelling. What's interesting is that this bridge over here, I think it's called the T2110 bridge, and it was damaged according to like satellite imagery from September 1st. So that's from even before the counteroffensive started in this area. But I'm not sure if it was always this way or if it was like a Ukrainian attempt at sabotage or if it was the opposite and it was a Russian attempt to like destroy the bridge before they retreated. But we haven't seen Russia retreat from this bridgehead just yet, so I'm very confused as to what occurred with this bridge over here. I would place my bets on the fact that it was a Ukrainian attack. But in addition, we did have news of Russia blowing up another bridge, and there was a lot of ambiguity about like where was the correct location because several people did have geolocations and each one was in a different place, and I'm still confused as to where it was because some reports are saying that no bridges were blown up in the area around Balakliya, and then some are saying that this one over here to the northwest of the town was blown up, and then they show this photo, which really could have been from any bridge, so it's very hard to tell. In the background, you can see like a white apartment building, so it's possible that it was here. I'm not going to say for sure that it was. So once I get a confirmation of the actual location of the bridge that was blown up, I will talk about that. And the thing is, if it was Russia blowing up the bridge, that's pretty interesting because they would be sort of admitting that they would lose ground around this entire area west of this Balakliya River over here. So maybe they're hoping that this river can be used as a natural defense point to prevent any additional attacks towards Balakliya because this really did come out of nowhere, and I'm sure the Russians were sort of anticipating this in the days leading up to the assault, but it was not enough to prevent Ukraine's breakthrough, just given the fact that it's so lightly defended. And one thing to look out for is that there's this compound called Unit 65, which is really centered around here. I'll highlight it. This area around here. And this is just a huge ammo depot. It's filled with Ukrainian equipment, and that includes NATO equipment, all the best technology, and it was discovered by the Russian forces a few months back, and they had like a very cool video where they like scoured through all the equipment and all the ammo, all the missiles, and think of it now. Ukraine is very close to taking it over. They're like what, like less than a mile away from the Unit 65, and if they're able to take it back, then they can at least reclaim some of the equipment that they lost while being pushed back by Russia in the beginning, and that could just also help with cutting off the supplies for Balakliya over here, as you can see. So, according to Rybar, now Balakliya is already in an operational encirclement, which doesn't necessarily mean that physically it is fully cut off, because that's not the case. You can see that pretty clearly this area is still red, but it does mean that the transportation of supplies is hindered by Ukrainian artillery, and in this area at least Ukraine does have the higher ground, and they do have better positions with their artillery, so they can have a field day in terms of shelling Balakliya now. So that will be difficult for Russia to deal with. They could probably fall back in some areas just to um, regroup and then launch their own counterattacks, because that is certainly possible in this area. And in terms of long-term goals for Ukraine and Russia, I would say in this region, the long-term goal for Ukraine would be to first of all take Balakliya. It is a pretty big city, and also taking over Volochiv Yar. This is a town that is very important. It is sort of like a hub over here, has some like ammo depots as well, and it is really just like a main center of for the command of the Russian military in the center of this front in Kharkiv. And then once it is taken, the Ukrainians could push in the direction of Izium and actually flank it from the north. And then with concurrent attacks from the western parts of the river, they can then attack Izium and make it fall, which would be a major disruption to Russian supply lines and to morale in general, which is why Russia will make sure to um, give their best shot at preventing this from occurring. What I'd say the Russian plan is to first of all repel this initial assault, but then actually go on the offensive and reach this entire chain of forests over here, right in front of the national park. I would say that's probably their goal. And in addition, they would want to advance in the direction of Husarivka, Chepil, and destroy this bulge sticking out over here. And then from there, they could take out all the towns right next to the river, which can be used to threaten Izium. So they want to just like relieve the area around Izium. That's probably part of their long-term goal. And then in addition, if they were to reach the forest over here, they could actually attack Chuhuiv, which, although it is on the other side of the Donetsk River, if they were to attack Chuhuiv, that would be a major problem in terms of supply lines for the Ukrainians in the Kharkiv front. And just given the fact that it's so large and even has an airfield and numerous amounts of equipment, it would be a major loss for Ukraine. But it is certainly possible if Russia could push back this initial counterattack. Now, in the area of the northern Kharkiv, there were some rumors that Russia actually took over Sheshtakov, and it does seem like it has some equipment that could be seized. But no, that's not true just yet, because for that to happen, there really has to be an implication that Paramoha fell. But even like the pro-Russian sources are saying that there's fighting going on in the area around Paramoha and Ukrainka. So the Russians use their position around Bayrak to sort of go on the offensive over here, and they did gain some ground. So I did alter my map to indicate that. And let's say the two towns do fall, then that's a problem for the Ukrainians in this area over here in Verkhney Saltiv and in Zumiluvka. So they would have to withdraw from there before they get encircled. And then finally, the Russians would be able to assault Sheshtakov itself. And from there, they can reach this road over here, and that's a major road that connects to the Saltivsky district in Kharkiv. And if it were to happen, it would be a major hole in the Ukrainian line around here. So do look out for what occurs over here. That's it for today. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.